Hi, folks, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. As I'm recording this, it's just a couple of days from the second anniversary of the release of ChatGPT. It came out on November 30th, 2022. And that means universities and professors in particular have had 2 years to grapple with how LLMs are going to affect the learning and teaching of computer science and programming in particular. And even more specifically, how do you teach intro to programming courses in the age of LLMs being able to write code for you? On this channel, I've already looked at a couple of papers by some of the same co-authors as this paper, where they looked at how an LLM would perform on a CS1 and a CS2 class if you just give it the English language questions of the tests on those courses. And they found that GPT-4 scored in the top quartile of both of those classes if it were to be evaluated as a student. So obviously that raises the question of how do you structure intro to programming classes? How do you teach them? How do you grade them? In this paper, the authors are proposing a small intervention. So they're not talking about how to restructure the entire intro to programming course, but they're introducing one new type of exercise. They call this exercise prompt problems. And the idea is to frame problems where students have to write a prompt that will then generate code to solve that problem. So it's basically testing how well students can understand a given problem and then express that understanding in plain English language to prompt an LLM such that it can then generate a correct solution. And the fact that they're designing an exercise like this means that they're already assuming that it is an important skill to be able to prompt an LLM, that crafting effective prompts is a skill that needs to be developed and an important one for a programmer to have in their skill set. All right, so how are these prompt problems formulated? They're presented as mappings of input to output. So not directly as an English language description of the problem, because then you could just take that and put that into the LLM. So here you see an example which provides several input-output pairs. And this problem has to do with swapping parts of a matrix. The student then has to understand what's happening in these input-output examples and then frame a problem statement in English language that can then be used to prompt an LLM to generate code. Now, you might say that isn't this trivial? Why would this even need an exercise? And to answer that, the authors did a pilot study where they took a bunch of CS grad students, not undergrads, and gave them some of these prompt problems. And what they found was that even CS grad students could not come up with decent prompts for these problems in many instances. They could not craft a prompt that would solve the problem. And so that drives home the point that you cannot take it for granted that effective prompt writing is easy. So this is what that tool looked like. There's a representation of the problem, either input-output pairs or the desired output. There's a text box where the student can enter their prompt. And when you click to ask ChatGPT, it generates some code. And then in the back end, when you submit that code, it's run against a bunch of tests. And if those tests pass, then it counts as success. An important thing to note is that the instructors of this course introduced these prompt problems as an ungraded optional lab task in their CS1 and CS2 courses. So they're just beginning to dip their toes into the water with these kinds of problems. And this table summarizes what they found. You can see the problems that they tried over here, which ones were tried in CS1, and which ones were tried in CS2. And these are relatively simple problems. Classify an age using a set of labels, average the 3 middle values in a set of 5 values, and so on. And you can see the kinds of examples that were given to illustrate that. In this column here, you see the fraction of students who were able to successfully solve the problem with a prompt, and also the average number of submissions, that is prompt revisions, it took for them to solve the problem. You can see, for example, this one, average the 3 middle values, took on average 7.5 repetitions, and only 65% of the students that tried it could solve it. And some of these problems have average number of tries pretty close to 1, which means most students got it on the first try. But you can see a lot of them have average tries above 2 or close to 2. The authors got some feedback from students about how they felt about these prompt problems, and mostly the feedback was pretty positive. Students said that some of the generated code taught them about new coding constructs that they hadn't gotten to in the class material yet. Some said that it was a learning tool because they could see the structure and syntax of code and how it related to the problem being solved. Others said that being able to write out problems in natural language improved their computational thinking and problem-solving skills. It was not all positive though. Some students seem to have a prejudice against using AI. One said, "I have a strong belief in personal creativity. I refuse to use it for programming." And I feel this is somewhat unfortunate because these are tools that should be approached with an open mind. A small number of negative responses were somewhat concerning. One student was worried about getting a job in programming. Another one said, "You have just ruined my self-esteem. It would have taken me 35 minutes to figure this out, and that damn computer did it in seconds." And I think this is where instructors and teachers have to explain the potential and the perils of these tools and try to steer students away from these kinds of negative outlooks. All right, so that was a quick look at how instructors for computer science, particularly intro to programming, are trying out new kinds of problem formats for the generative AI age. And this one was pretty simple and straightforward. Just try to develop the skill of understanding a problem and then prompting an LLM to solve it. And they found that it is indeed a skill that needs to be taught on its own. I hope you enjoyed that. If you like content like this, please like the video, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much.